The courtroom doors closed with a final, echoing thud, and with it, the temperature of the entire room seemed to drop several degrees. No press, no public gallery, no sketch artists, no family members, just 12 jurors, a court clerk, and 2 legal teams sitting in a silence so profound it hummed beneath the fluorescent lights like static waiting to erupt. The judge's voice, typically firm but neutral, carried a different weight that day. "Lock every entrance," he said. "What follows is not protocol. It is containment." The murmurs had begun hours earlier, rumors rippling outward like a stone in still water. A sealed piece of evidence, Exhibit 41, was to be shown. Federal clearances had been required to unseal it. No one outside the immediate legal circle had seen it. Even the prosecution had treated it with sacred caution. But now, as the court settled into stillness, the judge looked directly at the jury. "We are now entering Exhibit 41, he said. No further explanation was needed. The screen on the far wall flickered to life with grainy footage, date stamped several months before the trial began. A room aboard a luxury yacht came into view, modestly lit, its walls soft gold, the texture of obscene wealth and privacy. The camera had been mounted discreetly, positioned high in the corner, and it captured the 2 men seated within. One, unmistakably, was Diddy. The other, Sean Carter, Jay-Z. They were alone. The room bore no staff, no entourage, no distractions, only 2 whiskey tumblers sitting untouched on a low table between them. Their movements were sharp, deliberate, the kind of body language that needed no audio to convey tension. Diddy paced with a kind of panic disguised as poise, hands moving in wide gestures as if trying to control something slipping through invisible fingers. Jay-Z sat still, elbows on knees, his gaze heavy, unreadable. There was no sound at first. Then, a subtitle overlay appeared on the screen, paired with a synced transcript sourced from a secondary room mic. The first words struck like a slap across the courtroom. "You think this will stay buried?" Jay-Z asked. "You're playing with fire." Diddy responded, "It's already lit, man. We're just deciding what burns." A pause. Jay-Z again, "If this leaks, it's not just your name in flames." Diddy leaned closer to the table, his voice caught in a tremble the transcript couldn't quite translate. "Delete it. Nobody sees this." The footage cut to another angle, presumably from a hallway camera. It showed Diddy handing off a flash drive to a young assistant, eyes wide, lips moving. The transcript resumed. "If anything happens, this dies with me." Back in the courtroom, no one moved. The screen froze on a single frame, Diddy and Jay-Z standing side by side, looking out the window of the yacht into an infinite darkness. The silence in the courtroom deepened. One juror wiped at a tear. Another leaned forward, as if anchoring themselves to their own breath. The judge allowed the silence to linger a moment longer before clearing his throat, but even he seemed unable to speak at once. A minute passed, then another. No one stirred. It was no longer just about a video. It was about the understanding that this wasn't meant to be seen, that it had survived against every intention and plan, that it existed now as something sacred, terrifying, and irreversible. The prosecution turned slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly, "this is not about celebrity. This is about control. About what 2 men did when they believed the world wasn't watching." The screen went black, but the image burned itself into memory. The judge declared the video temporarily sealed from the press. "For now," he emphasized. But the damage was irreversible. Diddy remained unmoved, his face blank, unreadable. His hands gripped the edge of the table tightly, the knuckles drained of color. Jay-Z's seat marked Observer Council sat empty, but his presence lingered like a pressure on the back of every neck. The courtroom, though full, now felt abandoned by pretense. What followed shattered that illusion entirely. The prosecution called its next witness, Elias Reynon. He entered without flash, wearing a charcoal suit that bore the wear of anxious nights. A freelance security contractor, he had once managed surveillance logistics for Rock Nation events. On the stand, he sat upright, not proud, but resolved. "Mr. Reynon," the prosecutor began, "you were in charge of surveillance footage related to high-security events involving Mr. Commies?" "Yes." "Did you monitor or retain footage from a private vessel owned by a holding company affiliated with the defendant?" "Yes." Exhibit 41. How did it survive deletion? Elias inhaled slowly. "Because I didn't delete it." A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. "You were ordered to delete it?" "Yes," Elias replied. "Explicitly. I received a secure message from Mr. Comey saying, and I quote, 'This never existed. Handle it accordingly.'" "And you didn't comply. Why?" "At first it was protocol. I make redundant backups for all high-tier footage. It's habit. But when I watched that clip, when I saw the tone, the names involved, the implications, I couldn't in good conscience erase it." "Was Jay-Z aware that the footage would be preserved?" "Not directly, but his dialogue suggested he believed it was being deleted immediately." The prosecution handed Elias a printed transcript. "Can you read the bold line?" Elias read aloud. "You sure you erased the backups?" Diddy responds, "I trust my guy. We're good." "But you weren't good, were you?" the prosecutor pressed. "No," Elias said softly, "because the truth had already been saved." Diddy did not look at Elias. He stared forward, unmoving. "Where was the backup stored?" "On an encrypted partition server. I disguised it as dummy surveillance to avoid suspicion." "And how did the prosecution receive it?" "I turned it over, 2 weeks after I was fired without explanation." "Were you threatened?" Elias nodded. "A blocked number called me. The voice said, 'Let sleeping gods lie or you'll never wake up.' I never found out who it was, but I knew I couldn't stay silent." The defense rose in protest. "You were paid to leak this, weren't you?" "I was offered a settlement. I declined." "So you sabotaged the very people who built your career?" "No," Elias answered calmly. "I protected the truth from being erased." When Elias stepped down, he left behind a vacuum no one could fill. The court took a recess, but no one left their seat. No one wanted to be the first to move, to shatter the solemnity that had fallen. Diddy didn't move either. His lawyer reached toward him, then pulled his hand back. Something had shifted, and no one could say they hadn't seen it, because now they had. And that was only the beginning. The second half of the day resumed under the same fluorescent stillness, but something was palpably different. As the jurors filed back in, their eyes no longer scanned the courtroom with cautious curiosity. They were sharper now, anchored. The kind of eyes that had seen a crack in the wall and knew more would follow. Diddy sat in the same position, same suit, same controlled posture, but this time the control felt forced, as if his very muscles were resisting the inevitability tightening around him. The prosecution stood with quiet precision and said, "We call our next witness. Her name is Ariana. No last name will be used. Per agreement with the court, Her identity is to remain protected." Every neck in the courtroom tilted slightly forward, and then she entered, petite, pale. Her posture radiated tension so dense it was nearly visible. She carried no briefcase, no props, only her presence, which, despite its reserved demeanor, held weight the room hadn't anticipated. She was Diddy Combs' former personal assistant, the one who booked flights, handled encrypted media, managed digital footprints, and, as it would soon become clear, had been tasked with scrubbing away the past. "Ariana," the prosecutor began gently, "you worked for Mr. Combs from April 2022 to January of this year?" "Yes," she answered, voice steady. "You were present during the meeting where the footage from Exhibit 41 was recorded?" "Yes." "Did you know you were being recorded?" "No," she said, "but I knew he was. Every suite he used had a hardwired surveillance system. He insisted on it, said it was for protection." "Did he ever speak to you about the footage?" Ariana hesitated for the first time. "He was panicked," she said, "told me we needed to delete everything from that night, said it could undo too much." "And did you delete it?" "No." "Why not?" Her eyes locked with the prosecutor's. "Because he lied to me. He said there was no audio, but I knew there was. He wanted me to help erase it, but he didn't want to admit why." A murmur stirred in the gallery. The judge raised a hand, and it fell silent again. "Miss Ariana, did you ever feel unsafe after refusing to delete the footage?" "Yes," she said, and now her voice faltered just slightly. "I was followed. My apartment was watched. Then I was fired without explanation." "Did you leak the footage?" "No. I gave it to my lawyer, who turned it over when subpoenas started to move." The prosecutor stepped closer and presented a printed document. "Do you recognize this?" "Yes, it's my log." "And what does it contain?" "A list of every sensitive file, email, or media folder he asked me to catalog during my employment." "What is this entry?" he asked, pointing. "Folder marked Vault Carter AV. Encrypted. Access. Inner circle only. Instructions. Wipe after December 17th gala." "Did he refer to anything inside as insurance?" "Yes, that's the word he used, insurance files. Files he said could protect him if everything went sideways." "Was Jay-Z aware of these files?" "I can't say for sure, but his name came up. So did Bishop Jakes." That sentence alone seemed to unfasten the walls. For the first time, Diddy Comb blinked. Not just a slow, ordinary blink, but one that lingered, as if he could erase a moment by refusing to witness it. "Why are you testifying now?" Ariana swallowed, hands clenched. "Because I kept silent too long. I saw what it was doing to him. He stopped sleeping. He stared into mirrors like they might answer questions. One night he said to me, 'You ever feel like your own past is watching you?' I didn't understand then. I do now." The defense stood, challenging her motivation, suggesting bitterness, jealousy, even attention-seeking. But Ariana didn't bite. "This isn't revenge," she said. "It's the truth, and you don't get to control who survives it." When she stepped down, the prosecution let the room settle again, let the silence stretch like canvas. Then they walked back to center and lifted what looked like a thin sermon booklet. "Exhibit 4E," they said. "Kingdom Restoration Through Broken Men." A sermon delivered by Bishop T.D. Jake 4 days after the yacht meeting. The courtroom bristled. The defense objected immediately on grounds of irrelevance, religious protection, hearsay. But the judge interrupted, tone sharpened. Overruled. The court recognizes its pattern-based relevance. Proceed. The speaker was placed on the evidence table. With one click, the bishop's voice filled the room deep, deliberate, unwavering. There comes a time, it began, when men who've built towers in their own name must stand in the rubble and ask how they ever thought themselves gods. A wave of stillness swept through. I've counseled kings in secret, the bishop's voice continued, watched them cry in boardrooms and beg in sanctuaries, but grace demands truth, and truth isn't afraid of courtrooms, cameras, or consequences. He never said a name, but none was needed. When the recording ended, the courtroom felt like it had just returned from somewhere sacred and dangerous at once. The prosecution wasn't finished. They called a woman named Kendra Lyles to the stand, mid-30s, reserved but sharp-eyed, a former digital archivist tied to Bishop Jake's media arm. "Can you explain what's in your folder?" the prosecutor asked. She opened it. "Unlisted timestamps," she said. "Notes from a video recorded during a retreat the same weekend Mr. Comes visited the bishop's compound." The room leaned in. Why was this video never published? It was flagged as compromising. Internally, someone said it posed reputational risks. "Can you read the bolded note from the internal log?" Kendra did. Timestamp 214107. Speaker believed to be Mr. Comes off camera. "This is why I came here. I need to know if grace can outlive exposure." Audible inhalation from the gallery. "What was your impression?" the prosecutor asked. "That he wasn't seeking forgiveness," she said. "He was seeking cover." "Were there other statements from Mr. Comes recorded?" "Yes," she said. "One in particular audio only said, 'If I tell them in court, I lose everything. If I tell you here, maybe I keep my soul.'" The courtroom sat suspended between breath and disbelief. Was the bishop aware of the content? "I can't say," she replied, "but his sermon came 4 days later. That's all I know." The prosecutor approached the bench and moved to enter the recording into evidence. The judge approved. The defense stood, again trying to pivot to suggest spiritual distress did not equal legal guilt. But even they seemed to know the argument fell flat, because every piece of evidence, every witness, and every frozen frame of video painted the same picture. The silence Diddy built wasn't a shelter. It was a sentence. The prosecution closed the day not with testimony but with one line from an email found in the encrypted sanctuary archive. A message from Diddy to a private confidant. "I'm tired of pretending prayer fixes what money breaks. I can't keep dressing up the past in scripture and calling it healed. If that video drops, they'll finally see the preacher wasn't saving me. He was just listening while I bled." That was it. Court was adjourned for the day. But no one in the room stood up quickly. They sat there, still, in their own silence, not the controlled kind Diddy had curated, but the irreversible kind born from knowing too much. Because after that day, it was no longer a question of whether there was truth. The only question now was whether the truth could be contained. And everyone already suspected the answer. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. It wasn't just the tighter security or the additional federal marshals standing at every entrance, it was the air itself, heavier, thicker, as though the truth from the day before hadn't just been revealed, but had taken up residence in the very walls of the building. Diddy entered in the same charcoal suit, but his appearance had shifted. His eyes, once calculating and veiled, now held a quiet dread. He walked not like a man approaching a verdict, but like someone already sentenced, simply returning to sit inside the echo of what had already been decided. The jury was more focused than ever, their eyes no longer wandering. They didn't glance at the gallery, didn't fidget, didn't blink more than they had to. They were waiting. Not for a closing argument, not for a new piece of analysis. They were waiting to see. The judge didn't waste time. "We are now entering restricted evidence," he said. "What follows will not be distributed, described, or documented beyond this court. Exhibit 52 will now be viewed by the jury and legal teams only. Everyone else will exit or remain under court-mandated silence." And the courtroom emptied except for the essential players. Then the lights dimmed, the screen flickered, and the feed began. It wasn't like the earlier footage. This was longer, raw, uncut. There was no subtitle, no transcript, just time-stamped, grainy video from a security cam hidden in the interior of a private yacht. The setting was familiar, same suite as Exhibit 41, but this time the camera caught everything. Jay-Z and Diddy sat at a table. No staff, no noise except the low mechanical hum of the ship. 2 glasses of whiskey, untouched. Jay-Z tapped his finger slowly against the wood surface. "That last payout didn't land clean," Diddy said, barely above a whisper. "She's talking again." Jay-Z didn't reply immediately, just watched him. Then came the words that restructured the room. "Then you've got to kill this," Jay-Z said. "Not literally, but you know what I mean." Diddy looked away. "I already reached out to the bishop." Jay-Z's posture snapped. "You brought him in? Again? He's the only one who still sees me as fixable." Jay-Z's voice went low, almost like thunder beneath water. "You think Scripture is going to clean this? You buried a body of secrets and lit a prayer candle." Diddy voice cracked. "It's not about cleaning it. It's about dying with peace." Jay-Z leaned forward. "I didn't sign up for peace. I signed up for power." Then it happened. Diddy turned directly toward the camera. Whether by accident or some deeper compulsion, his eyes met the lens, and he said, "This tape, if it gets out, it's not just my career, it's my soul. I said things to him, things I've never said out loud. If they hear what I told the bishop..." Jay-Z stood. "You need to destroy everything, every file, every copy." Diddy shook his head. "I tried, but one of them kept it." Jay-Z slammed his hand against the table. "Then you better hope they believe in silence as much as you believe in grace." The footage cut to another angle. Timestamp indicated several hours later. Diddy sat alone now, jacket off, shirt unbuttoned. He held a small flash drive in one hand, a Bible in the other. A phone lay in front of him, not on a call, just recording. "I used money to cover what I should have confessed," he said. "I used God like a brand. I used people like shields. And I used you, Sean, because I thought your silence meant safety." He paused, eyes reddened. "I told the bishop everything. I cried on his floor like a child. He told me, confession without accountability is just manipulation. I said I understood. I didn't." He wiped a tear. "I'm not afraid of prison. I'm afraid of being remembered as a lie. But maybe that's what I was. One long, beautiful, powerful lie." He set the flash drive on the table and leaned into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I couldn't destroy it in time." Then black. The screen shut off. The lights didn't come back right away. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as though the courtroom had become a vault itself, holding not just legal weight but moral wreckage too heavy to speak over. And then, from the back row, a sound broke the stillness. A juror sobbed, not loudly, not with drama, just one raw human sound that shattered the atmosphere more forcefully than any gavel could. The judge cleared his throat, voice hoarse. Recess. 1 hour. People stood slowly. Every step was careful, as though the floor beneath them had become fragile. Diddy didn't move. He stayed seated, hands folded, eyes still fixed on the now black screen. The ghost of his own confession hovered above him. As the courtroom emptied, the judge looked back only once at Diddy But Diddy didn't lift his eyes. He remained still, perfectly still, as though still waiting to wake up from the version of himself he could no longer erase. Outside the courtroom, reporters shouted. But inside, the echo wasn't of questions. It was of something much heavier. A man who told the truth too late, and now had to live with the echo. When court resumed that afternoon, the atmosphere had calcified into something beyond tension. It was reverence wrapped in dread. No one whispered. No one shifted in their seats. Even the creak of the bailiff's shoes as he crossed the floor sounded like blasphemy. The jury returned with the expressions of people who had not merely watched a video, but witnessed a soul unravel in real time. Their gazes were distant, their movements restrained, as though a part of them had remained inside that blacked-out screen with Diddy watching a man confess not for absolution, but because there was nothing else left to do. Diddy entered in silence. His steps were slower than usual. He no longer looked like a mogul or a myth. He looked like someone walking through the remains of himself. He didn't glance at the gallery, didn't acknowledge the prosecution, didn't even exchange words with his own legal team. He simply sat, his hands no longer clasped in defense but lying on the table, palms up, as if surrendering. The judge began. Before we proceed to closing statements, the court has received a final submission from the prosecution. It is a written statement from Mr. Sean Carter. The gallery shifted, not with noise, but with instinct. The name landed like gravity on the proceedings. The prosecution unfolded a page. Per Mr. Carter's legal team, this statement will be presented without commentary. The court has approved its admission under cooperative acknowledgement. The lawyer read aloud. I was not aware I was being recorded. I did not know the private exchange would become evidence. And while I do not admit to wrongdoing, I understand the gravity of what has surfaced. Let it be known that I did not attempt to obstruct justice. My role was one of fear, not malice. But I acknowledge fear is not an excuse. The words were clear, measured. I distanced myself from Mr. Comey long before this trial. I warned him. I told him, the longer you hide the truth, the more violent it becomes when it breaks free. He did not listen. The statement concluded in a single, chilling line. Let this be a lesson that even kings can be humbled, especially when they believe the throne is forever. The letter was folded, entered into evidence, and passed to the judge. No further words were needed. Diddy didn't flinch. His breathing was shallow, slow, his shoulders slightly slumped. If anything had broken inside him, it had broken clean, no collapse, no eruption, just quiet ruin. The defense stood briefly, but there was no fire left. They didn't argue against the recordings. They didn't refute Jay-Z's statement. They simply rested their case, their voices low, their body language saying what their words no longer could. We have nothing left. But the prosecution had one last move. "We submit one final exhibit," the lead prosecutor said, "found in the encrypted sanctuary archive, titled Redemption Draft." A hush swept the courtroom like a silent gasp. It is a handwritten document, dated 3 months before the trial began, authored by Mr. Combs, never sent, never shared, but preserved. The document was read aloud by the clerk. The handwriting was described as uneven, scribbled, at times smudged by what looked like tears. The words cut deeper than any recording could. "I've spent years crafting who they think I am," it began. But none of it was built for judgment. It was built for attention, for fear, for legacy. But legacy means nothing when the lights go out. If that's true, then maybe I never had one. A pause, then the next line, smaller in script, as if written in hesitation. "I once told a friend, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of being seen for real. Now I think it's the same thing." The courtroom didn't breathe. The air was sacred. The judge declared court adjourned for deliberation. The jury rose, collected, and exited in complete silence. Not a glance exchanged between them, not a sigh. Just 12 people walking into a room to decide the final movement of a long, dark symphony. Diddy stayed in his seat long after the gavel fell. His lawyers whispered, tried to nudge him gently, but he didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the space where the screen had been. That screen that had played his undoing. That screen that had stopped being a piece of evidence and become a mirror. The gallery emptied slowly, reverently, like mourners leaving a funeral not of a man, but of illusion. There was no media rush, no questions shouted. Even the guards moved with less rigidity, as if recognizing they were no longer escorting a defendant but a man who had already sentenced himself. Outside, the world speculated. Inside, everyone already knew. Whatever sentence the jury returned would be ink on a page. The real judgment had already happened in that room, on that screen, in those words. And Diddy He remained still, quiet, a monument to the price of truth spoken too late.